In a moment, I'd like to take you through a game by the most talented teenage chess player in the world, Alireza Firouzja. Firouzja, in just a couple of days' time, is going to be playing in the Tata Steel tournament in the Netherlands. This is always one of my favourite events of the year. Somehow the organisers get it just right with that balance of players. They've got the top two players in the world, Magnus Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana, but they always manage to also include lots of really young, talented players like Firouzja. Also, Jeffrey Xiong is playing, Duda is playing, Dubov is playing. Wow, that's an exciting bunch of players in itself. And then, well, you've got Vishy Anand playing as well, 50 years old now. Let's see how he gets on. So Magnus Carlsen, he's not going to have it easy at all. But let's come back to Alireza Firouzja, 16 years old, from Iran. But recently, well, he's been in the news because he is no longer playing for the Iranian Chess Federation. It's a complicated story, but basically the Iranian Chess Federation prevented their players from playing against Israeli players. So, for example, Firouzja in the past has had to default his games against Israeli players. And, well, he's taken a stand against that. And now, well, he's living in France. He's made a very brave move and is no longer representing the Iranian Chess Federation. Well, we'll see what happens in the future, but you know, who knows? He might end up playing for France. He might end up playing for United States. Rex Sinkfield has a habit of collecting players for the US team, but let's see what happens. Firouzja is extraordinary because, you know, you can talk about other teenagers saying they have talent, you know, they have promise for the future, like all these Indian players who are doing remarkably well. But Firouzja, at just 16, well, it's not that he has promise for the future. He's already there. You know, he came second in the World Rapid Play, just recently at the end of December. He did very well in the World Cup this year. He got through the first two rounds, defeated Dubov, for example. He's won the Iranian Championship twice. He won the Sharjah Masters earlier in 2019. He is just extraordinary. And, well, he came very close to upsetting Magnus in Moscow during the World Blitz. Magnus won the game on time, but really, well, Firouzja should have won that game. And at the very least drawn. Firouzja is a fierce attacking player. He has a real instinct for attack, and that always fills me with confidence about a young player. You know, if you have that instinct to put some away, to actually go for your opponent's king, I think that's very, very important. As well as having a very sound strategic sense as well. But yeah, he likes to attack, and on the channel I've already shown a couple of his games, beautiful attacking games. You'll find those games in the Firouzja playlist, if you click on the eye up there, and find them in the video description as well. Do check out those games. But the game I wanted to show you here was played in the Turkish Team Championship in 2019. Now, his opponent, a decent player, 24-48, but rated a fair bit below. But still, this is a decent opponent. It's a very solid opening by both players. You can see that it's a Spanish, and it's this so-called Breyer variation where the bishop has come to b7, and along with the knight and the rook, puts pressure on this e4 pawn. This is a well-known variation, and this exact position has been played in hundreds of games actually. But we come to an interesting moment fairly soon actually. So the point of playing the bishop out to g5 is to provoke a little weakness here. So now Firouzja plays queen c1 to attack this pawn here. And king h7. Now, in the majority of games, a4 is played. And then, well, it's a really rich strategic battle, but you can see white is starting to play on the queen side. But this next move, I think, shows Firouzja's instinct. Pawn to h4. Please don't all scream, it's an AlphaZero move. People were playing this move a long time before AlphaZero was a gleam in a scientist's eye. So h4, typical move in this kind of position. To play h5, to try and chip away at black's king position, and potentially, if that pawn is taken, then a knight can get into f5. And if that pawn is blocked, which in many cases you would like to do, then that leaves the g5 square available for a bishop or a knight. So a move like bishop b3 already starts to feel a little bit uncomfortable for black. Now, this is not the most popular move in the position h4. As I said, a4 is, but and probably because it leads to very, very complex positions after, for example, this and c5, and the position just blows up. But I think that's kind of typical of Firouzja. He is quite prepared to take on his opponent in a really, really complicated game. So let's go back anyway. Firouzja's opponent, Haznedaroglu from Turkey, apologies if I've mangled the pronunciation, played c5. And actually, really, white can be happy with that, pretty happy, because the centre has closed and that fully justifies this h4 advance. Because white doesn't have to fear a counterattack in the centre when the centre is closed. But black plays c4. This is quite typical to bring the knight into c5 and gain space on the queen side. But white continues on the king side, and this is very nice. Now, white is not going to deliver checkmate, but strategically it's very nice to do this, as we'll see. Knight c4, and well, if this knight is allowed to remain there, then it's problematic because there's always pressure here. Perhaps the knight at some stage might hop in here, and black can start to prepare a queenside offensive with a5 and b4. So Firouzja tackles that straight away with b4. I love this game because we see white's switching from side to side in his play, so typical of the Spanish. I do like the Spanish from the white side very, very much, I have to say. Always been one of my favourite openings to play. And a5, and again, Firouzja is really consistent with his strategy here. He drives the knight away straight away. And I think this is a very confident move, actually, because at first glance, this seems as though black is doing all right in this position, because after this, the knight hops into a4. Seems like a reasonable post for the knight. And a couple of rooks have exchanged. Seems to ease some of the congestion in black's position. But Firouzja has judged this extremely well. So bishop d3. And we can see already some pressure here. And that is absolutely key in this position. Basically, white has faith in his space advantage here. This lovely pawn chain, which locks out, for example, that bishop. And that gives white's minor pieces, and well, all white's pieces actually, more freedom to maneuver. So first of all, attacking the pawn on b5. Rook attacks the queen, queen a3. Bishop a6 defends the b pawn, not a beautiful square for the bishop, it has to be said. Which bishop do you prefer? No contest. Again, a very cool move from Firouzja. I like this. Rook c1. He's happy just to exchange rooks. Takes a bit of pressure off the c-file for white. But we'll see this is all part of a kind of grand strategic plan, actually. And pawn takes pawn. Now, it seems as though white hasn't achieved too much on the king side, but just watch out. This exchange basically wins white the game. Notice white has exchanged an h-pawn for this f-pawn. Now, that means nothing for white, really. Doesn't harm white's king's position. But black's king, well, it's very well defended at the moment. But with the pawn from f7 missing, you never know when black's king might suffer. More on that in a moment. Okay, what's white doing? Knight e2. Well, the knight was doing nothing on g3, and it swings round and exchanges off the knight on a4. Okay, more exchanges. One might imagine that black would be pretty comfortable with this, but like I said, sometimes in these kind of positions you have to have a bit of faith in your space advantage, faith that you can actually squeeze something out from the position. And now the next knight comes round. Again, nothing doing on the king side, so it can be more usefully employed on the other side of the board. And black swings the bishop round. Now, what exactly is white doing with this knight? Well, if black were to exchange, then we can see where it's off to. It's going to go to a3 to put more pressure on the b5 pawn. And once white plays queen c6, exchanging off the queens, then you can see that that b5 pawn will actually fall very quickly, with probably just a winning position. So instead, black played knight b6, but this allowed a big move from Firouzja. Rook c6. This is great. This is so often a jump. The c6 square is a jumping off point for white's pieces in the Spanish. So you can see the rook threatens the d6 pawn. And that's tough. That's hard to meet. That was too much for black to stand, so he exchanged off. And now, of course, if queen takes pawn, queen takes bishop. Not possible. So the queen just edged back to c8, maintaining protection of the bishop on c8. But obviously that pawn is now such a strong piece, deep in the heart of black's position. And now this knight swings round to this glorious square d5. And I think we can see already that basically white strategically has a winning position. And now the killer. So this is threatened, but we don't need to go back to defend that because we have queen a2. Now, what did I say about the king? Once that f-pawn goes, then the king is wide open. And black is basically lost here. That queen threatening to come into f7. So, for example, if king g7 would stop that, then queen d5. Threatening this one as well. Or what about queen takes c6? Queen goes in. And a couple of checks. And bishop drops. Very simple. Notice white's king rock solid. Nothing is going to touch that one. Okay, let's come back. So queen a2 just played, threatening queen f7. Therefore, queen c7 stops that. Queen e6 anyway. The queen comes in, of course. The pawn's still immune. King g7, and now queen e8. And that was the final move of the game. Queen protects the pawn on c6. and now threatens to play knight d5. And that really is the end. Black has nothing here. Let's just check out a couple of moves. For example, queen e7. We can exchange. The knight enters in on the d5 square, and basically the c-pawn advances. And very soon that is going to be a new queen. One of these moves will land. Or bishop takes b5, of course, is the threat in this position to take the bishop away from c8. And another move. Okay, what's about, let's say, knight b2? Let's just check this one. Well, now we can see how white's attack might proceed. And this one finishes with a checkmate. As you all know, I like to see a checkmate. And this just shows the beauty of white's position when you have a space advantage. It happens so often in the Spanish and King's Indian positions as well with white. So white can switch from side to side. And now white switches decisively back to the king side. g3, this is lovely. So queen h4 mate threatened. The queen comes over to g4 to prevent that. Bishop e2, we can give up a bishop. And let's go all the way to checkmate. It's all with checks. And finally, queen f6. Okay, slightly long variation, but absolutely forced, basically. Really a beautiful game from Firouzja. And like I said, he has that instinct to attack. And it's going to be fascinating to see how he gets on in the Tata Steel tournament starting on Saturday. Watch out for my videos. It's going to be great. See you.